All right. Welcome to Get Your News On with Ron, everybody. We are a little late because we had a few kind of tech issues going on here. Let me get over here to the chat. And of course, as you guys already know, my guest today is Lee Camp, and we're going to give Lee the skinny on what's going to happen. Sorry again, we're late, but we were having just a goofy Hangout issue, a goofy Google Hangout issue. But Lee Camp, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, man. So
after 20 minutes of not being able to hear me, it's good to be heard.
20 minutes, me and Lee were going back and forth, and we were doing some lip reading, and for whatever reason, we weren't having any sound. We didn't know what was going on. Lee had gotten,
man, it was the CIA.
Yeah, it was, the man was trying to bring us down, but we're here anyway. So Lee, this is Get Your News On with Ron. I like to call this the world's first viewer-curated streaming news show. And what we do here is I log on to a stream and people tweet me articles and tweet me topics, and that's how we build the show. Nice. I don't plan any of this stuff out in advance. And usually when we have a guest, I let the viewers ask them questions. And a lot of people are stoked to have you today. A lot of people have been looking forward to this, even though we're 20 minutes late. So yeah, folks are going to have some questions for you, but we'll start out, we'll start out with the basics. So you're coming to town, you're doing 2 shows at the El Rey, Friday and Saturday. So fill people in, man.
Since I'm sure you have viewers elsewhere, to town means Los Angeles. So.
Oh yeah.
I am coming to the town. Yeah, I'm heading to Los Angeles taping a new comedy special. The special guest each evening will be Jimmy Dore. We'll have a little intro by Abby Martin as well. It should be a really fun couple nights. And yeah, I'm gonna be filming it for I don't know where the special will air. We'll find out. But just wanted to tape a new special. Love Los Angeles. Always get amazing audiences out there. So if anybody wants to come join us, you can still grab some tickets.
And where can they go for tickets?
This is probably the easiest is leecamp.com. Click the schedule tab or redactedtour.com.
Right on, man. So what made you, because I know this isn't your first go around. You got a couple albums out. You did some stuff. I know you recorded at least one of them in New York. What made you pick LA for this go around?
Well, I just hadn't, even though we taped the last Redacted Tonight stand-up special in LA at Laugh Factory, I hadn't actually done my full hour there, because when I did the specials with RT, then it's only a small percentage of, I was 15 minutes of the show we aired or whatever. So it wasn't a real, it's kind of a special evening of redacted correspondence and John F. O'Donnell and Naomi Caravani and everybody. So I wanted to do kind of my own thing, and I'd already taped my last film special. Full hour was in New York City. Both of my comedy albums have been in New York City. So, wanted to switch it up.
Right on, man. So a couple things here already coming in. Platypus says, thank you for the super chat contribution, by the way, Platypus. And Platypus says, I love you both so much. So doesn't get that's a pretty easy opening question. And,
I love platypi. So
me too. So and some other folks, Daniel says, thank the tech gods. Jason says yes. And everybody's just kind of happy that we that we made this happen. And then there's a few questions over here on Twitter.
That's different. Normally I walk into a room, people say, show me your tits. So this is a new new introduction.
Right? So we got a few questions over on Twitter. Yusuf says, no questions. Just want to say I love you guys and more power to you. Trust me, the Norwegian mainstream media is no better. Ergo, I love your show and I tune in to get the truth about what's going on in this world. Stay strong. Dickless Liberal has a question. Lee, what do you think Trump will do about the North Korean conflict now that it isn't as simple as him blustering Rocket Man and getting congruence? Now that it is complicated, will he step up or hide under the bed? That's what Dickless Liberal wants to know.
Well, with Trump, it just all comes. The only thing that's steady with Trump is his ego. So, you know, even Congress people have talked about you could get a promise from Trump one day, it doesn't mean anything the next. So if it makes his ego look good, if people are talking about Nobel Prize and shit like that, then I think he'll stay the course. But, you know, we need to keep in mind that the U.S. mainstream media and the military-industrial complex are just about the only two entities left, it seems, on this planet that want war between North and South Korea and between us and North Korea. So they seem to be, you know, the whole world wants peace on that peninsula. The North and South Koreans seem to want it. And it's just our military and our media that want to continue a warlike state. But you know, I do worry that maybe we do see peace there for a few years. North Korea gives up all their testing facilities, and then, like with Libya, then we see it as fine to go in and invade at that point because we know that they have nothing to defend themselves. Now, my guess is that they've gotten assurances from China and some others that that's not going to happen. So I do have hope. I mean, people have to keep in mind the history behind this. We killed a third of their population. A third. All right. To put that into perspective, we lost 0.5% of our population in World War II. So the fact that we killed a third of their population during the Korean War, that we were just napalming anything we saw that moved, I think that sticks with the people. I think people tend to have that resonate with them generations later.
Mm-hmm. So here's one for both of us. I would like to know what both of you think about socialism and a post-capitalist U.S. Another very light question. Lee, I'll let you go first, buddy.
Thank you. Thank you. You give me all the easy ones. This is T-ball. I don't really subscribe to an ism, but I think people get too caught up in the black and white nature of, are we this ism or are we that ism? We have a lot of socialist programs in our country, whether it's Social Security or Medicaid or Medicare. That is, you know, by definition, people pooling us as a society, pooling our resources together, our money together, and covering, you know, things like the elderly and things like that. So to say those things are horrifying is ridiculous. And it's taken years of generations of social engineering and propaganda to get us to be willing to, you know, shit all over anything with the word socialist attached to it. And luckily, you know, Bernie Sanders' movement kind of removed some of that stigma. But I do think that the market economy it seems to be our undoing. Having a market economy that puts profit over all else, puts profit over life, puts profit over clean water and clean air, it is destroying the world around us. And that doesn't mean that people didn't get some good things out of it. I don't deny that, but I think that it could very well be our undoing, that profit is put above all else. And that comes back to the market economy. And you know, there's far better minds than mine that have kind of analyzed this, that I think have done some great thinking on this. I think everybody should read up on Peter Joseph books about this topic. And I think he's put forward some brilliant thought on it. But, you know, we need to start questioning the market economy as a whole, I think.
Yeah, you know, I was going to bring up Peter Joseph as well. I know that's a colleague and friend of yours, and we recently had him in studio over on the Jimmy Dore show, and there was a really cool discussion between those guys. So yeah, my answer is, you know, I'm totally with you on the isms. Now, I've often said to people that if I had to pick an ism, socialism is the clearest glass that I would subscribe to. But,
does orgasm count or no?
Oh, you know what? I wasn't factoring in orgasm because that brings socialism down to number 2 or maybe number 3. Because I feel like orgasm would have to be selected twice if it counts. I don't know if it does, but yeah. So I've said, well, that seems like the clearest glass, but I'm totally with you. And as far as, you know, we need to ask the questions of a market economy. And one thing that Peter Joseph points out that I think is so cool, and it's something that you really never think of, or at least I personally would never just think of in my day-to-day, where he talks about how we had such a long history where there just wasn't money and there wasn't like formalized markets, at least not the way we know them. So this idea that there's nothing else is just a farce. It's actually quite the opposite. And, you know, getting real big picture, I'd like to think that we'll slowly descend. I would love to see, you know, like just sort of a gift economy or something like that. But I think I don't foresee that happening in our lifetimes. But what I would like to see happen would be maybe a descent into something where something like a bartering is of a higher value, but it's done with the intent of actually benefiting the community and making sure nobody goes without.
Well, yeah, and you know, if you look at where our technology is, our unfettered capitalism is forcing us to use technology in often negative way in kind of positive. So we now have the technology and everything for Uber and Lyft, which are, you know, gutting public transit and other things like that. But that same technology that tells you whether, you know, you can use Uber Pool or whatever, and you can share a car, and it has the algorithms that decide who's, you know, there's several people headed to the same area and they can share this Lyft ride. That same technology could be used for a whole neighborhood to have an app on their phone and share things that people don't use that often, like tools. Like you could have one chainsaw in an entire, you know, 3-mile radius, and everybody's on this community app, and we all just share the chainsaw. But that's not how our community is. Our system is set up. It's set to be that all of us need to own our own, and we have to have it, and it's mine. And it doesn't really. It took a lot of social engineering to get us here, to get us to think that each of us owning a chainsaw that we never use is better than one chainsaw for 1,000 people that we all share. Like, it took a lot of social engineering to get us to think that, and now our environment's collapsing because we all need to own and consume so many things.
Yeah, I mean, the whole idea of, you know, even just like a gig economy, which people like to refer to it as, like your Ubers and your Lyfts. There's so much potential to do something like what you're saying, but instead we kind of have this obsession with materialism and ownership that we're not really using it that way. But we very easily could. We totally just could, you know, rethink the way we view things and start going that route and using it to benefit a community. And I think there are some corners of the country, and, you know, I mean, literally corners, because I'm thinking of Bellingham, Washington, where they do like a green economy thing where they have a formalized bartering thing in place. And it's really benefited their community, and it's a really cool thing. And the other thing to keep in mind, the 1% does that kind of stuff all the time. They scratch each other's backs all the time. And that's how they get along. So it's like, well, everybody should be doing, I mean, they're doing it. Like, everybody should be doing it. Not that you want to be like predatory capitalists per se, but to say that this doesn't have value is just a straight up farce. We put value on this. And
you're talking about like the little area pockets, communities that are doing something different. You know, economist Richard Wolff talks about how the beginnings of capitalism were done in the same way. They were kind of these little pockets of capitalist activity happening around the feudal system, and they were pushed out. It was like legitimately some of the people who wanted to be separate from the feudal system, or, you know, had been booted out from the feudal system, were living in the woods. And so these people were living in the woods, and they started trading and having, you know, a monetary system and things like that. So it shows that a different economic system doesn't necessarily just have some instantaneous revolution. It can slowly build, and we have to start creating small areas, small worlds of what we want to see.
So we're getting a lot of questions here. Let's do another pretty tough one here. Do any of us have any plans on coming to Colorado anytime soon? Lee, I'll let you go first.
Well, I like that one. It gets me to tell everybody about my gigs again. I have played Denver and Boulder a couple of times, but I don't have Colorado on the schedule right now. But I'm coming to Los Angeles, and I'm doing a Northeast tour as well. So New York, Boston, Rochester, all of them, Portland, Maine. So again, that's leecamp.com/schedule or redactedtour.com to keep pitching my live shows. But, yeah.
And a few tickets were just added for Los Angeles. Any Los Angeles folks, a few tickets were just added.
Special guest Jimmy Dore, and I hear rumors that Ron Placone may be in the audience at least at one of those shows.
I heard Ron Placone showing up. He's going to be hanging out. Absolutely. Here's another tough one for you, Lee. What's your educational background? Where'd you go to college?
Raised by wolves, but they were very smart wolves. I went to the University of Virginia. I studied English and psychology. I would have studied journalism, but they didn't have it. So I did the English thing. And, you know, I really just finished, like about 2 years into college, I knew I wanted to be a humor writer since I was like 12, but I only decided I want to be a stand-up comedian at, 18 or so. And I truly wanted to quit college and just do stand-up. But I, figured the parents would kill me. So I finished the school days and then immediately moved to New York, where I did stand up for 12 years and toured the country. And then the rest of my time in the comedy world has been here in DC since 5 years ago.
Yeah, man. Yeah, I always forget you started like super young. See, I always just thought I wanted to be in a punk band. So comedian was actually kind of like, my parents were like, "Oh, good, he's not going to be in a punk band.
Where are the punk band photos, Ron? When are you going to share them?"
Oh man, there are a couple on Facebook. There's one where I had a Misfits cover band in college, and I have like shoulder length hair, and there's fake blood all over me because we were the Misfits. And that photo has surfaced a few times.
Nice.
Platypi, thank you very much again for the super chat contribution. And Platypi wants to know, can you both make your way to Australia one day? And please don't skip South Australia. Lee, if you want to tour together in Australia, I am in. So ball's in your court, buddy. You want to do an Australia tour together, I'm in.
It sounds pretty good. I did play Brisbane and Sydney a few years back, probably 7 years ago now, and had a goddamn blast. So got to go back.
Yeah. I've never been to Australia at all. Like, I've never been there as a tourist or, performing. My New Year's resolution.
Ron, it takes a commitment. You got to decide to go there. It's not like the middle of the U.S. You're not like, oh, we in Australia? Like,
yeah, right. Like, yeah, I think I could do. Yeah. Man, it's funny. This year I made the resolution because I've never, unless you count Canada, I've never performed abroad before. Like, I've just never performed. I've been abroad, but I've never performed abroad. And I decided this year, my New Year's resolution, 2 new countries a year. I'm going to go there and perform anywhere that I can.
Nice.
Just to start doing that. And so I'm going to the UK in October, which I'm sure I'll be asking you for help at some point. I'll be asking you for tips soon enough. Don't worry. But yeah,
I love touring the UK. It was the best, and there's a little more of an appreciation for political comedy over there than there is in the US. And the Edinburgh Festival is incredible.
That's what I hear. I hear, like, I'm not going to be there around Edinburgh because I'm going to be my girlfriend's coming with me. So we're making it a kind of business meets pleasure thing. Like, we're going to be going around. We're going to be seeing Ireland, seeing Scotland and England. But, I'm just going to be doing sets anywhere that I can, trying to meet people, trying to network so that I can, come back and do preferably a more extensive tour,
Cool. That's great.
Yeah. So let's see here. And Lee, people are requesting that you come to Toronto, Rochester, Boulder, Saginaw, Michigan. And I've been to all those places myself as well, and I'm pretty sure you have.
I've been to all those areas. I've played Toronto multiple times. I'm headed to Rochester, so whoever said Rochester, it's coming up. Go to leecamp.com/schedule for the last time. And the only person who's angry, people buying tickets to my show. But yeah, I got to most of the Michigan. I want to add a Michigan show soon, maybe Detroit or something.
Detroit's one of my favorite cities, man. I love Detroit. I love performing in Detroit and in all of Michigan. I love, like, that part of the Midwest is just a special place to perform. And Detroit has a place near and dear to my heart. Just because it's just so cool, man. It's the underdog, but it's the cultural hub. And it really has a beauty about it for that. Yeah. So a lot of love to Detroit. Jeffrey wants to know, Lee, who are you inspired by the most? And they don't specify. They don't specify a literary person, comedian, musician. They just say, who are you inspired by the most? So you can take that question any way you want.
Well, I guess the one I get the most is who comedically, and comedically, that there were a lot of people that were pivotal. Some people can predict, like George Carlin and Bill Hicks, and I often mention like Chris Rock's earlier stuff. I think was pretty interestingly political. I referenced one of Chris Rock's line recently from Bigger and Blacker, where he said they ain't never gonna cure AIDS because the money's in the comeback. The money's not in the cure. So he talks about how curing people isn't good for basically Wall Street. And just recently, a Goldman Sachs analyst put out a note saying, like, advising clients not to invest in cures because cures are bad for their profit. So it shows how prescient and brilliant, some of the earlier Chris Rock was. But, then there's a lot of people, like the people I get nervous. I feel like I get nervous about meeting are usually like, impressive activists or academic minds, or people like Chris Hedges or Cornel West. Or those are very inspiring voices and people. And then there's people that have passed on as well, like Abby Hoffman and Bruce. And writers like Catch-22, Joseph Heller was, I think, pivotal in showing me that you could like make something so dark, like brilliantly satirical. Mark Twain, of course. But yeah, there's a lot of different realms where I take a lot of inspiration, I think.
Yeah, the only time where I met somebody and was just so kind of humbled by being in their presence that I just straight up embarrassed myself was Dick Gregory, and Amy Goodman. The first time I met Amy Goodman. Now I haven't been watching Democracy Now! As much recently, but over the years when I was in college and stuff, I mean that was my favorite newscast, and a newscast that really opened my eyes to the corruption of the corporate media when I was a lot younger. And man, when I first met her, I was, I pretty much just babbled. And she asked me it was at a conference where I was actually speaking in a room next to her. And she asked me what I did. And I don't remember exactly what I said. I'm pretty sure I just forgot and I just babbled and said hello a bunch of times. I don't think I remember. Or I was like too scared to just say comedian because I didn't know how that would sound. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I didn't know what to do.
Just eyes glaze over and she walks away.
Right. I wanted to prevent that. And so I just babbled and said hello. Like,
yes, I met her. Well, I met her a few times, actually. I was on one panel with her. But I think she does brilliant stuff. And unfortunately, Democracy Now! They're still great on so many things, but they've kind of fallen hook, line, and sinker for our take on Syria, the kind of official standpoint of what's happening in Syria. So I don't like that aspect, but in general, they're still doing a lot of important stuff, and they've been covering, the Palestinian, the massacre of the Palestinians that's going on right now. So there's still good stuff coming out of there. What was the first one you said? Oh, Dick Gregory. Yeah, he was another one. I got to meet him and open for him on a few shows in New York, and pretty incredible to meet him and talk about combining comedy and activism. He was on the front lines of so many civil rights battles. Actually got shot in one of them, but I believe he said it was friendly fire. But pretty incredible human being, and it's too bad he's gone now.
Oh, absolutely. That's a voice we could really use right now. Yeah, when I met him, I just said it's an honor over and over again. Like I think I said it like 6 times, and like I just kept saying it. And then he signed my vinyl for me, but I didn't even like ask him. I was just like clutching it, like I was just clutching,
just holding it.
LP. Like I was just like, God, this is my constant. And then he just took it, and then he's like, "Good for you, Ron," and we took a picture.
Yeah, he's fascinating because he got a little conspiratorial in his older age, and some things that I wouldn't say I sign on. However, I would also like to point out that he had legitimately at least 4 of his good friends assassinated. So, you know, he knew the Kennedys well. He called them the Kennedy boys. He was close with Medgar Evers. And he had another, his driver was killed, was like run over, and he believes it might have been a hit rather than just accidental. But whatever the case, it's like when many of your friends he was with John Lennon the night before he was killed. And so when a lot of your friends have been assassinated, you start to go, you know, maybe some shit's fucked up.
Yeah, man. I'd imagine when you get the peek under the hood that guy's had. Yeah, I mean, I think, yeah, first of all, kind of like you hinted at, you're right to be a little cautious, even to the point of a little paranoia if he crossed that line, because, yeah, that's a peek under the hood that you and I, even at this point, can only just sort of speculate and imagine, you know. Here's a fun one. First of all, Ron, let's start a punk band. You know what? If you're in the Los Angeles area, I'd freaking love that. I'll be honest with you, though. I'm not a very good player. I am average at best, but I'd love to jam. Here's a fun one for us, Lee. Any tips for my first open mic night? Lee, I'll let you go first.
Oh, God. Just know that whatever happens, it'll be garbage. And, if you get the words out of your mouth and they sound like sentences, then chalk it up as a win. Because I think every comedian has to suck for a couple, like there's a time period where you're just kind of bad, but the opening, you know, year, you're supposed to suck hard. So just be prepared for that. I feel like no one gave me that advice, and I feel like if I hadn't gotten 5 chuckles in my first time on stage, I probably would have quit there and then. And I think the key is to just keep at it.
Do you remember your first time on stage?
Yeah. It was my 18th birthday or around there, and I did an open mic. It was actually at Matt's Pub and Comedy Club, which went out of business, but it was the upstairs, which was just a pub, and they had an open mic, but it was mostly musicians. So it was like the audience was like 7 redneck drunks who didn't understand why I kept talking and didn't play the guitar. So.
Where's this guitar? Dude, yeah. My first time doing comedy wasn't even at an open mic. It was when I was like just out of college. And actually where I went to college, I went to Indiana University. There is a full-time comedy club now. But when I was there, the club was not in existence yet. So there wasn't really much of a comedy scene, but there was this one-nighter show that happened. And I finagled a guest set because a guest set, for anyone not in the know, that's when you kind of just go up and do 5 minutes and you're just kind of a comedian that was added last minute to the show typically. And there was a stand-up comedy club on campus. So I joined it, and through that you were able to like contact the agency that could get you a guest set. So I got a guest set. And I bombed so royally, it was ridiculous. I had no clue what I was doing. I didn't know how to write a joke. I actually didn't even realize you were supposed to do that. I thought you were just supposed to riff. Like, I didn't know you were actually supposed to. I was one of those people, man. I was clueless about comedy until I started doing it. Like, a lot of people, like, they knew a lot about. I knew nothing about comedy.
Oh, yeah, I'd read all the books, I think.
Oh, dude, not me. I was the total opposite. I was just like a big punk rock dude that was a big news junkie and really hated George W. Bush and wanted to like be on the radio or something, and thought that stand-up was just another vehicle to that, which I guess in a way, you know, it totally is. But I just sort of fell into it because of that. And I remember when I first started, and other comics would be like, so who's your favorite comedian? I had no clue. I mean, the only comedians I knew of was George Carlin and Bill Hicks. And I kind of thought they were something else entirely. So I didn't even think that was an acceptable answer. Like, I thought that was being like, that'd be like, who's your favorite band? Oh, the Beatles. So I was like, well, I can't give that as an answer. So I would say Henry Rollins or Jello Biafra just because I had no answer. And I wanted to try to sound like I knew what I was talking about.
That's amazing. Yeah. The other weird thing was in the first 6 months, and this was not because I was good. I still was doing one open mic a week, just sucking. You know, you're doing 5 minutes or whatever. And I got on the college activities board because I knew that way I would get to meet the bigger name comedians. And so I'm on the college activity board, and then we bring Jimmy Fallon to the school. He'd only been at SNL like 2 years. I mean, he was already a success at SNL, but not for long. And he comes, and so I just, I would love to open for these guys, but I don't know how you end up opening for these. So I just said to him, like, hey, I'm looking for the show. I'm a comic too. And he goes, oh, great. You want to open? And I was like, yeah. So
how'd it go?
So within like the first 6 months, I opened for Fallon, and it went pretty well because college kids, and you're making college jokes, and I'm making fun of, probably something that was going on at the college. So it went great, but it wasn't because I was good. It was just kind of luck.
I feel you, man. I had those moments too, because it eventually led to something like that too, where I got to open up for Upright Citizens Brigade, and I did okay just because I talked about stuff that was going on campus.
Right. You're like, how about Mr. Jeffries? What a pedophile! Yeah. And they're like, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
This guy's amazing.
So here's Krillin. Thank you very much for the super chat contribution. And this question is, both of us can take a stab at this. Ron, why is Morrissey getting trashed in media? Did you go to the Hollywood Bowl? I went for the, I'm guessing this Madison Square Garden show in November. Krillin, I have not seen Morrissey since, I think 2007 was the last time I caught Morrissey live. As far as him he has a history of kind of not choosing his words as carefully as one should when he talks to the press. I mean that last thing that he, when he was talking about the Kevin Spacey thing, that was really bizarre. Now, in fairness to him, he said that his comments were totally taken out of context and were spoken within a bigger statement. And when he asked the outlets to release the full audio transcript, they didn't do it. So in fairness to him, he might be telling the truth. When you take a lot of those comments on their own, they sound really freaking bad and not okay. But if it was in the context of a longer statement, that might kind of change the meaning and the intention. And that's what he's claiming. And we haven't seen the transcripts and no one's released them, at least not to my knowledge. So, but he has a history of, I think, speaking out of emotion at times and coming across as insensitive. And I don't think he cares all that much, which is why in recent years, he's not really that big of a fan of doing interviews, because he'd rather not put himself into a trap. He'd rather just sing on stage. And I guess I get it. I don't know. Lee, do you have any thoughts on that?
I regret to say I have no thoughts on Morrissey. So
all right.
I'll leave that to you. I don't even know what he said.
He made a few. I mean, it's been a while now, and I'm not sure what this what Skrone's referring to specifically. If there's something more recently I'm not aware of, but he said some things about when the whole Kevin Spacey issue was going on. He said some things basically like, "Where are the parents?" and stuff like some really kind of off things. But he said that he was making it was within a bigger statement that he was making. So it could have just been an aside where it's like, well, of course you're wondering this, this, and this, but these poor kids, and he's saying, look, that was totally taken and spun out of context. That's not, that wasn't an accurate representation of what I said. And when he requested the transcripts, they weren't provided. So, it was kind of just a he said, she said, and it kind of just drifted off. But yeah, that's essentially the skinny there.
You don't want to be caught saying, "Oh, rapists are going to rape. Where are the parents to stop?"
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Not a good look.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's kind of, and if there was anything more recent, I'm not cognizant of it, but if there is, I'm sure it followed the pattern of him not being very careful with his words. Ray, thank you very much for the super chat contribution. Very much appreciated. Let's see here. We have some more questions for you, Lee. And I want to ask one while I'm finding another one for you. Because I've been curious your take on this, and this is something that I know is near both of us, but something that you specifically are dealing with literally firsthand.
Genital herpes? Genital herpes?
Naturally, but I thought we'd close with that before we get there. Yeah. Before we get there, RussiaGate and what's been going on with RT America. So what has changed since the FARA Act on your end specifically?
Well, I know. Yeah, I mean, so the news department had, or whatever, the head of the news division or whatever had to register under FARA as a quote unquote foreign agent. It hasn't, in fact, impacted me personally at all. I know that it looks like it's been used to try and make, especially their news division. I mean, there is kind of a different thing. It's like I have my own show doing my own stuff. Jesse Ventura has his, Larry King has his. But so the news division, I think, has a tougher time because their job is to go report at the White House, to be at these press briefings. And I think it's been used, the FARA Act thing has been used to try and make it difficult for RT reporters to kind of get access to the events that they need access to be a news division. Other than that, I don't know. It hasn't impacted me. What's impacted me far more is the same suppression that you guys are dealing with the Jimmy Dore show. I mean, that's hitting any outside the corporate media voices. And as you guys have talked about, and I've talked about it, it crushes numbers and searches and everything else to just try and get everybody to only watch the corporate legacy media.
Yeah, I mean, and that's why this whole thing has frustrated me. I mean, I remember when we were at the Convergence conference together back in September, you know, we were making jokes about the whole RussiaGate thing. And I don't know about you, but I was thinking by now it would be a thing of the past. It's still going. And I mean, it's going to just go indefinitely at this point.
Well, it's an act of desperation, you know, so that's why they can't give it up at this point. They have nothing else, kind of, you know, the corporate Democrats have nothing else to really say that they're trying to help America with. I have a joke in my act now about, you know, oh, we're the resistance. Oh, you mean on Wall Street exploitation? No, we're not on that. Oh, we're the resistance on big pharma? No, not on that. Oh, we're the resistance on, you know, prison, unlimited prison and population? No, not on that. And they just go down the list. Well, what are you fucking resisting? Oh, well, we don't like porn star hush money. Like they're not really resisting anything. So they just have to keep pointing at Russia and say, you did this. And, you know, you guys have done a brilliant job of covering it. I think you're doing an incredibly important service. But I think most of America, even if they believe that Russia put up Facebook ads or whatever, they don't think that that's why Trump got elected. So I don't think it's really working. But, you know, some of these things, you say it long enough, and studies have proven, psychologists have proven that people confuse familiarity for accuracy or fact.
Right.
So if you say the phrase Russia hacked the election over and over, even if it's a panel, did Russia hack the election? You just say it again and again and again. And eventually people go, oh, I guess Russia hacked the election, even without any evidence.
Well, and when I see other people on the left that are a little more just either on board with it or even just a little more patient with it, like, oh, let's let it play out and stuff like that. And I'm like, you know what? I feel like you can't even give it credibility anymore at this point because look at the way this has been used, first of all, where it's been used to suppress independent voices. It's been used to have Silicon Valley decide what is and isn't free speech. It's been used to have intelligence agencies monitor social media more than ever before. It's just, how does parroting this and endorsing this serve any positive purpose for the left? It doesn't. Especially since even if something were to happen to Trump, you're getting Pence. Like there's just no positive purpose. I can't think of one at this point.
Well, positive for them, there's a purpose, you know, to shut down anti-war, anti-corporate thought. So positive to the corporate Democrats, there's a big positive. But in terms of, you're right, in terms of, there's a lot of kind of left-leaning voices or voices that consider themselves left that are like, well, I guess I'll sheepishly go along with RussiaGate because maybe it'll get Trump out of office. And, you know, it proves my liberal bona fides that I endorse it or whatever. But you know, it is just WMD all over again. You know, it's even the same fucking faces. It's Mueller. Mueller was on the, you know, he's the head of the FBI during WMD and went in front of Congress and said, oh, yeah, there's WMD. We got to invade Iraq. So it's like it's the same people. It's Bill Kristol. It's the same. They've trotted out the same neocon goons to lie to the American people all over again. And it's really because if you go along with this, then what are you going to stop at? What are you going to stop and say, hey, we as a people are going to stand for truth and evidence? You know, if you let this pass as like, oh, maybe it'll be good and take down Trump, you kind of have given up your ability to stand up for truth and stand up for verifiable evidence of any of this stuff. It's all a big fucking dog and pony show to cover up the fact that most Americans are now thinking about corporations taking over our system, and the fact that our election system is a fraud, and the fact that we're always at war, even though the American people by polls don't agree with these wars. It's all kind of come out. And so now the ruling elite have nothing left but to say, don't look at us, look at Russia.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Jeffrey says, thanks, dude. And Jeffrey, thank you for your super chat contribution. Malik has a suggestion for you, Lee. And I don't know if you've ever tried this, but a great pickup line, I'm a foreign agent.
Yeah, it does it every time. It does. It works like a charm. I find it that much funnier because, like, one side of my family is like this old, we have George Washington's niece Nellie signed their hand towels, because back then the hand towels were like rare and stuff. So we have Nellie Washington's hand towel framed on our home wall, and I'm named after and descended from Robert E. Lee, and it's just like I'm this old like lineage of Americans, and yet I'm a foreign agent all of a sudden. Interesting. Didn't realize.
So, Lee, I want to talk about this, and then we'll wrap up here. Thank you so much for bearing with me through the tech issues. I'm glad we plowed through that, and we're able to make this happen. But let's talk about the Poor People's Campaign for a hot minute, because I know you're in D.C. right now. I reached out to Nick Brana, head of Movement for a People's Party. I know he got arrested. I reached out to him yesterday and heard back from him early this morning, and we actually talked about some of the stuff he said on Aggressive Progressives earlier today. But let's hear your perspective. Have you been privy to anything that's going on? Have you been in the thick of anything, or what's been your exposure so far?
No, I haven't been at this protest. I've been at many protests, but I'm kind of drowning in all my work and everything, getting ready for this special and stuff. But I do think it's wonderful. It's supposed to be 40 days long. It's about the exploitation of poor people in this country, and it's only getting worse. And every subject, everything you think you care about is connected under this unfettered capitalist beating down of the poor and middle class, and that comes back to race issues as well. And so I think it's wonderful that people are standing up about this issue. And I'm good friends with Nick. He's an amazing person. I think what he's trying to do with the People's Party is pretty impressive. And, try to get out of this two-party corporate duopoly that owns everything and agrees on 80%, 90% of all the structural issues of this country. When you have two parties that agree on 90% of everything that controls our lives, and then they have the 10% that they spend all day bickering over, you don't really have two parties. You have a slight difference of opinion of one party. So I love that Nick's trying to break out of that. A lot of important stuff going on.
Yeah, absolutely. So, well, what do you think? I mean, last question. What do you think is what do you think the way forward is going to be in a broad sense? Because the way I see it, and one of the things we talk about on this show, Get Your News On with Ron in particular, is we have all kinds of discussions over and over again, and there's people making good points from all sides of it, where Green entering versus Dem exiting versus Dem entering versus Movement for a People's Party versus just picking a cause and kind of rallying to the thing. Because I feel like it's good that people are working on all kinds of different things, doing all kinds of different things. I think that's great. But on the same note, the movement for change, for real change, is only so big right now. That's just the reality. And it seems like we sort of have to channel the energy towards a specific goal if we want any kind of, significant long-term progress. And I don't know exactly how that's going to look, but I know it kind of needs to happen. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah. Well, I think that if you try and change everything at once, you're going to quickly burn out.
Sure.
I think people have to find their passion of activism and really focus on that, but also realize that most of these things are interconnected. So if your passion is to end factory farming, then I'd say become hyper-informed on that, become, very active on it, find out, the groups to join up with and what you're doing and why, and become active on that topic, and you'll be the most informed on it because you're so passionate about it. But then at the same time, also realize that guess what? The anti-war movement and the Stop Factory Farming movement both come under the umbrella of unfettered capitalist market economy that puts profit above, torturing animals. Yeah, if it makes us a buck, then sure, torture them. It puts profit above war every minute. Yeah, if war gets us dollars, then let's do it. So you should join it. All these activists should join up at the same time. Like maybe factory farming is your passion, but you can also show up at the anti-war protest because this is all related. And I think if you were to add up all of those things, every different movement that is connected in this way, you would have millions of people in the streets on all these things. We have to be careful not to get too splintered. And then in terms of the party conversation, I do believe we've got to keep talking about breaking up this two-party show that means nothing. But I don't have a lot of hope that like tomorrow some independent party is going to get 51% of the vote or whatever. That doesn't mean I don't support these candidates. I had Shahid Buttar on this week, Redacted Tonight. He's running against Nancy Pelosi, and I do think these outside voices should be heard and should fight to get elected and all that stuff. But I think at the same time we need to realize that the levers of the state have been taken over by the corporate entities, and the change that will happen at the electoral level federally is going to be very small. The change that can happen locally and statewide and on smaller issues, or not even smaller issues, but just more localized issues, can be quite large. And those smaller things matter. And so I think they can spawn. They can grow and bloom and infect other things. So, focus and get active in your community.
Yeah. And to just draw it back to the Poor People's Campaign real quick, Poor People's Campaign, I think, is doing a really good job making these connections. There were some criticisms out there saying, oh, there's so many things that they're addressing, and it's almost like they're spreading themselves too thin. It's like, well, no, they're seeing connections between all these issues, which is essential for all of us to do. And that's something that Martin Luther King really started harping on right before he died. So they really are picking up that torch and running with it, which is really beautiful to see.
Yeah, getting a mass poor people's movement and questioning capitalism and questioning Vietnam did not turn out well for Martin Luther King in those final couple years.
Yeah. So, Lee, please, thank you so much for joining us. Thanks for plowing through the issues. Folks, thank you for all your questions and for participating. So, Lee, please use the end of the time here to plug the shows once again and plug your website and tell people where to go to find out about the tours and the tickets and everything else.
Thanks, man. Thanks for having me on and for speaking the truth. I have my big shows coming up in Los Angeles. Special guest Jimmy Dore. That's May 18th and 19th. There are still tickets left because we just had to buy more chairs and have them brought in. So that you can get those tickets at leecamp.com/schedule or redactedtour.com. Also, I am touring the Northeast, so I'll be up in New York City, Boston, Rochester, all those cities, Portland, Maine, Burlington, Vermont, and that's all also at leecamp.com/schedule. But if you haven't checked out Redacted Tonight, never heard of it, don't know what it is, go check out youtube.com/Redacted Tonight, or you can also get all of that at my website.
All right. Thanks so much, Lee. And thank you guys for tuning in. This has been Get Your News On with Ron, the world's first viewer-curated streaming news show. You know the drill with me, ronplacone.com, patreon.com/ronplacone if you are so able. I love you all very much. Come see Lee this weekend if you're in Los Angeles. If not, find out when he's coming to a city near you. And I will see you tomorrow at 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. Peace.